The next number of the core team meetings and the first ones are going to be focusing on our church's mission and values. And we need to have these engraved in our hearts and in our minds for a number of reasons. First of all, we need to have it so deeply a part of us that if anyone asks a question, so you're planning a church, what's going on? What's that about? What are you about? We can just say, we're about this, we're about this, we're about this, we're about this. So it becomes automatic that we can communicate to people, this is our mission, these are our values, this is what we're about as a church. So that's one reason why we need to have them very firmly engraved in our hearts and in our minds. And what that'll do is that'll help to create excitement. So one of the things I found as I was communicating to people, hey, I'm thinking of planning a church and this is what I think it's about, people started saying, I want to be a part of that. Yes. Like that's the kind of church I want to be a part of. That's the way I think church should be. And so it creates excitement, not just for Christians. We don't just want to steal Christians, but for non-Christians as well. We communicate to them that this is a real, loving place where life happens, and it's not about all of the red tape. It's not about the show. It's about loving God, loving one another, and we're not seeker sensitive, but by being real, people will be drawn to that. So it creates excitement. The other thing is so that we can all have a very clear vision as to what this church is about. So we all have to clearly know and see what it is that we're about, how we're going to get there, and so it'll help create excitement in us. We need to know why we're doing what we're doing. That this is more than we need some place where we can all fit in, so let's start a new thing. It has to be about more than that. And we need to know what that vision is, and it needs to be so engraved in us and engraved in anyone who says, I want to be a part of this. Now, what we're doing, what we're hoping that God is doing here is not, and the focus should not be about, here's what's lacking in Kingston, and so we're hoping to do something good that's been lacking. That can't be our focus. And there's a couple reasons why that can't be our focus. The first one is what we'll end up doing is drawing people who are just upset by church, who are always wanting something better than what they have. But a church full of those kinds of people, it's inevitable that they're not going to be happy. Something will not make them happy. And so we don't want to attract, and we don't want to become the sort of people that all we do is say, that's bad, that's bad, that's bad, let's do it better. Because if we kind of settle in that attitude, then we're just going to be picking stuff and picking at stuff, and we don't want to do that. So that's one of the reasons why. The other reason is this. I'm convinced that God has given me and us and this church a unique calling and vision for Kingston, and we need to focus on that. We need to be clear in focusing, this is what we think God wants to do in us and through us and in the city. And we need to communicate that to people. We don't want people to buy in because they think, well, everywhere else is bad, so I might as well go there. We want people to buy in because they think, hey, that's exactly what's on my heart. That's the kind of church I want to be a part of. So we need to very clearly understand our vision for those two reasons. So we're not focusing on this is bad, but also so that we know and are aware of what God is uniquely wanting to do in us. And so that's going to be for the first little bit, for the first couple months, especially over the summer, that's all we're going to be focusing on. We'll be focusing on our mission, our values, and what we think that God is uniquely doing in us and wants to do in us in this city. And what I think God wants for us is for me, for us, and others to share in that excitement, not just because it's a new thing, but share in the excitement and say, I think that's where God's leading me. I think He wants to use me in that context, and I think that's where He's bringing me to be involved in that kind of a church. So that's just a little bit of an intro to say that's what the next couple months are going to look like in our study as we'll be going through our core values. Now, our church is called Encounter Church, and there's a reason for it. The reason is not because I really like the name that I use for the Sunday night teachings, and I figured I would just use that. There's a reason why I chose that name for the Sunday night teachings, and there's a deeper meaning, a deeper reality that is going on in that word and using that phrase, and what I think that God would want our church to be and to be called. So what is that deeper reality that's captured in our name? It's this little phrase that I think God is put together, and it's this: engaging with the living God at all times and in all circumstances. And that's our mission. Our mission is that in us and in everyone in our church, that we would encounter God in every aspect of our lives. So whether we're at work, whether we're at home, whether we're at school, whether it's church stuff, whether we're with friends, whatever the setting is, in all of those settings, we can encounter God. God is not just segregated to Sunday morning. That in all aspects of our lives, there is always opportunity to engage with the living God. That's the first part. The second part is, and in all circumstances. All circumstances means when we succeed and when we fail. When there's cause for celebration and there's tragedy and cause for mourning. In all of these circumstances, God is a God who can be experienced. We can encounter Him. We can engage with Him because He's real. And God just doesn't want to have one part of us. There's a preacher I really like, and he says, God does not want to be at the top of your priority list. He wants to be at the center of your life. God is not just one thing amidst other things. I work, I have God, I have family, that all of it, at all times, we're experiencing, we're engaging, we're encountering God, not just on Sunday morning. And so our mission as a church is to help people, whether it's in our corporate gatherings, whether it's when we're off at work or at home or at school or with friends, is to be able to help others know who this God is so that they likewise can encounter and experience Him in their lives at all times and in all circumstances. There's a passage that I believe speaks to this well and really helps give us a deeper understanding for what it means, what it looks like to experience the living God at all times and in all circumstances. It's Psalm 38. Psalm 34. We won't look at the whole psalm. We're just going to look at verses 8 to 9. This is what the psalmist writes. Psalm 34, verses 8 and 9. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in Him. Oh, fear the Lord, you His saints, for those who fear Him have no lack. This is an invitation from God to us. And it's an invitation that I believe God is saying that we need to extend to others as well. So God's saying to us, taste and see that I am good. And He's calling us to say to others, taste and see that the Lord is good. So there's a double invitation that's happening here. Why taste and see? Those are two of the five senses. Why not hear and see? Why not taste and touch? Why not smell and touch? Why specifically would He use taste and see that the Lord is good? I don't think that it's just because he picked two words. I think there's a richness of meaning in this idea of tasting and seeing. And so I want to flesh those out a little bit because that's going to help give us some deeper insight. Again, what it means to experience God at all times and in all circumstances. First of all, it's the sort of phraseology you would use for people who are hesitant. What do I mean by that? Think of kids. When you want your children to try some new food that they've never tried before and they look at it and they're like, I don't want anything to do with that. What do you say? No, taste it. It's good. Taste it. You'll like it. It's not bad for you and you'll enjoy it. Or we try to convince people, listen, can you just take a look at this? Just quickly look at it. I mean, I'm notorious for this with Catherine, where I'll set something or do something, especially recently as we've been changing and setting everything up. I'll periodically say, sweetie, can you come take a look at this? And my timing's not the greatest. But what it is, I want you to see this because I think you'll like it, and I want you to respond favorably to what I've done. So this taste and see, they're invitations that we get in real life to people who are hesitant. And this is in the text, this is the invitation from God to us. Our tendency is towards sin. Right? We're sinful by nature. And God is saying, try me. Like, look at me. I'm good. I'm better than what your heart naturally desires. Things that are not of me, I'm better than that for you, for your soul. And we are hesitant. The flesh in us doesn't naturally lean into God, and so we're hesitant because we prefer sin. And so God sees that hesitance in us and is saying, I know what you want, but see me, taste me. That's why he says in Malachi, test me. Test me. Gather your offerings into the storehouse. See if I won't pour out a blessing so great on you that you won't be able to contain it. There's this God saying, listen, give me a shot, try me. You won't be disappointed if you taste and look at me. Now, it doesn't end there. Again, likewise, that's an invitation that I believe God has called us to extend to others. So it's not just something we receive, oh, I'll taste and see that he's good. But he's called us likewise to say to others, I know your tendency. I know you're hesitant. But try and taste and see he's good. He's good. It's not bad. He's not this evil judge who just enjoys destroying people. He's good. He's loving. He's gracious. He's wonderful. And so we're called to extend that invitation to others as well. Christians and non-Christians, inside and outside the church. We're constantly called to remind brothers and sisters about the goodness of God and to go deeper with him. But that's why we do things like Bible studies, and that's why we have accountability and mentorship and fellowship, because what we're saying to people is, even though you're saved, there's still this tendency within you that leans towards sin. And so you need to be reminded, taste him, just try him, look at him, he's good. He's good. But we also extend that invitation to other people to say to them, you need to join the family of God. You need to believe. You need to follow. And when people notice this stuff, I mean, when I was at Sport Check, there was a guy who he knew that there was something different about my life, and he couldn't put his finger on it. He couldn't explain, Andrew, your marriage is good. You tend to be happy and joyful. Not that you're bulletproof, but it's like you have this meaning, this purpose. There's something in you that's different. And I remember he said, I don't even know why I get up in the morning. What is it? And so here he is. He's obviously longing for something. We've all been made for that worship, for that connection with God. We've been made with this longing. And so that was an opportunity for me to say, listen, man, the difference is Jesus. He's the difference. And it was an invitation to him. You got, not that Christ is a product, but as a preacher, and this is the truth, as a preacher, you're kind of a salesman a little bit. in that you're trying to tell people that what God is offering is better than the competition. So there is this element of you're trying something right now, but it's not working for you. It's not doing the job. And there's a reason why. Because there's something greater and better out there. Taste it. Just look at it. Try it. It's good. So God invites us. We invite others to taste and see that He's good, that He's worth it. But there's even more to this tasting and seeing. I think there's even deeper principles and even deeper realities we can dig at this, the tasting and the seeing. There's something unique about food. There's, of all the senses, it's the one that has this incredible way of satisfying and sustaining and pleasing us. And it's the only sense that if we were not to fulfill, we die. Think about it. You can go blind, you'll live. You can go deaf, you'll live. You can have all the nerve endings in your hand be damaged, you'll live. You can have your nose damaged, you'll live. If you can't, if there's something about the eating and the bringing in of food into your body and the tasting it, you would die. There's something unique about tasting and eating and ingesting food and the invitation from God. Taste, try, ingest. And so I think that's where we're going. Food is something we both want and need. Again, you don't need to see anything. You don't need to hear anything. You don't need to smell anything. But food is this thing where when you have it, one, you want it. We all know what that's like. There's plenty of things we eat that we don't need, but we want it. So there's this desire, but we also need it. We need food. Without it, we would die. And God wants us to know something. I think this is why hunger is so powerful. This is why God commands that we fast. And this is also why I believe that if you've ever fasted for an extended period of times, an hour into it, you start saying, do I really have to be fasting? There's something there's something deeply spiritual about this. And so flip over to Deuteronomy chapter 8. This is an interesting story. Jesus quotes part of this passage when he's being tempted by Satan in the desert. Here's what we know. God calls his people out of slavery in Egypt and into the promised land, but they disobey. They say, we're not going to take it. They make us look like, grasshoppers. We're nothing. And so God says, oh, okay, well then you're all going to walk for 40 years and all the older people are going to die. None of you are going to see the promised land. It'll be for your kids in the next generation. So God lets them go hungry. He could have given them food right away, but he lets them go hungry for a reason. And then we read this as they're in their desert travels. This is Deuteronomy 8, verses 1 to 3. The whole commandment that I command you today, you shall be careful to do, that you may live and multiply and go in and possess the land that the Lord swore to give to your fathers. Verse 2 is where it really picks up here. And you shall remember that the whole way of the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness, that he might humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. Verse 3. And he humbled you and let you hunger and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that comes from the mouth of God. God, who lets us go hungry, who created this thing where we get hungry and we need and we want food, is inviting us to taste him. And he wants us to know there's a deeper hunger in a person, even more than food. And when you're hungry, it changes you. Like when you're really hungry, those Snickers commercials, that's legitimate. When you're hungry, you're not yourself. You're grumpy, you're irritable, you're a different person. It's amazing how you're totally different when you're hungry. And so there's a deeper hunger, even than that which affects our whole being. And God is saying, there's food for your souls that I offer. Taste. Taste that I'm good. Taste that the deeper hunger that lies within you, that deeper hunger for life, satisfaction, pleasure, that deeper hunger, I satisfy it. So taste and know that I'm good. And again, that's an invitation from God to us, and that's an invitation God calls us to extend to others. To say to them, this hunger resides, yes, even within you. And food and pleasure and sex will not satisfy it. Taste that you would know that God is good and that He alone satisfies. Now, in the same way that there's more to tasting than just the, taste, I know you're hesitant, but it's good. There's more to the seeing that God is good. Where you look is where you go. What I mean by that is 99% of the time, you are looking wherever you're walking. You're not looking one place and walking another because you'll bump, you'll trip, who knows what will happen. Where you are looking determines where you go. Sight determines direction. Where you look, you go. That's important. In Hebrews chapter 12, after the author of Hebrews in chapter 11 lists this incredible heritage of faith, talks about all these people and the faith that they had, how it was credited to them as righteousness because of their faith. The author of Hebrews then says this, starting in Hebrews 12, verses 1 and 2. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, all these people that he's just mentioned, Abraham and Rahab and David and Moses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. So here's Jesus who goes through tremendous suffering. Not just the physical agony of the cross, but the experience of having the full wrath of God poured out on him to the point that he would say, why have you forsaken me? So this incredible suffering that he goes through. And we look to that because that helps us to be obedient. Because there's something in that that is comforting to say what he went through, one, so that I wouldn't have to, but so that two, he could model to me that if a man, and he was God, but he was a man, could experience that kind of separation from God that no one's experienced, then surely whatever is in my life to experience, by the power of God, I can bear it. So we look to Christ, and that encourages us. And as you see him, and this is the thing, when you run a race, if you ever watch races, people don't turn their heads. People's like, their heads are locked and they're looking at the goal. And so where we're looking, where we're running, that's what we're moving towards. That's what we're pursuing. And so as we see Christ, as we look at what he's done, that he's good. It's what he's done shows his goodness. As we look to him, as we move towards him, we behold his grace and his mercy and his affection for us. Sight determines direction. So we need our sight to determine our direction. And so God is inviting us, saying, look at me. Look at me. Move towards me. Come this way. In it you will find deep, deep treasures. Don't be looking at other things. Right? Don't focus on this trouble, this problem, this conflict. Take your eyes off of that. He's not going to do. You need to look at him. You need to look at him and see in him incredible goodness and mercy. And again, I'm saying this over and over again, but this is crucial for us to get right now at the onset of things. Not only is this an invitation that God extends to us, but it's an invitation that he says you must extend to others. You must tell others who are looking every, I mean, like with Malachi, there are times I want him to look at me, and he won't. And I'm not saying don't go grab people's faces, but I need to grab his face and say, look at me, right? And we need to extend an invitation to people who are frantic here and there, and say, just stop all this nonsense. Look to him. See that he's good. He's good. Now let's look at our passage again, Psalm 34. This time I want to focus on verse 9. So we spent a lot of time on verse 8, tasting and seeing that the Lord is good. The invitation from God to us, and then the invitation we're called to extend to others. Verse 9, oh, fear the Lord, you his saints, for those who fear him have no lack. What does it mean to fear God? There's a lot of different ideas about this. A lot of different people will tell you this is what it means to fear God. Some people will say fearing God means this deep sense of respect and reverence and awe. I think it's quite a bit stronger than just that. And the reason I think it's more than that is because when Isaiah beheld the glory of the Lord, he didn't even see God. All he saw was the train of his robe. He literally saw the tips of his garment in the temple, and that was enough for Isaiah to say, "Woe to me! Woe to me," which actually means, if you look at the Hebrew, what he's saying is, "I'm coming apart at the seams. I'm disintegrating." And when John beholds the glory of the Lord in his vision and revelation, he says, I fell down to my face as though dead. It's like I'm going to die. So it's much stronger than just saying respect and reverence. Now, having said that, I don't think that fearing the Lord is how we understand fear. As in, I am actually afraid, terrified of it, and here's why. You avoid what you're afraid of, because sometimes you might have an irrational fear, but there's a danger. Like I'm really scared of bees. Bees are not going to kill me, but if a bee stings me, it's going to hurt and be uncomfortable. There's no benefit to being stung by a bee. We avoid things that we're afraid of, and things that we're afraid of don't like that we're actually terrified of. They're not the sort of things that then cause us to love and respect. Just imagine a very, very abusive dad who rules through fear. His kids don't love him. They don't take comfort in him. They don't enjoy him. They simply obey him because they don't want to get hit. So I think it's not over here just a respect and an awe, but I also think it's not over here this actually be terrified. So what do I think is a good biblical understanding of fear? And I want to use an illustration that's not my own. I'll say that right now. It's not my illustration, but it's probably the best one I've ever heard in my life. You can go online, you can go on YouTube, and you can watch videos of people scaring goats. And I don't know if you've seen the way this works, but if you sneak up behind a goat and you just sneak up behind it and startle it, the goat will freeze. It'll lock, its arms will lock, it'll freeze, and then it'll fall over. And it'll just stay there, and then eventually it'll come out. And so you can watch videos of people scaring goats. They sneak up behind a goat and they scare it, and then it just falls over, and then they all have a laugh, right? Now that's funny. You wouldn't do that to a lion. Like you wouldn't sneak up behind an apex predator, try to get behind him all quiet, and then once you're maybe 10 feet from the lion, then try to jump and startle him. And here's why. He'll kill you. One swipe and you're done. So you tread carefully around the lion in the way that you don't around the goat. I think that's a good picture of what it means to fear the Lord. It means you tread carefully around him because you know that in his ability, he can take you out like that. Like he is able to end your life in a moment. No effort for him. And so you're careful around him. You dare not speak flippantly, deal flippantly. Like you take God and the things of God serious because you know he's powerful. A number of months ago, there was this tremendous thunderstorm. And now, normally thunderstorms don't wake me up, but it's the middle of the night, and I kind of slowly wake up, and I think maybe there was a loud, uh, thunder, and then I woke up, and I'm kind of lying there, and I'm just watching, and the sky lights up, and it's maybe 3 a.m, and so I'm watching the sky light up, and then there was a lightning bolt, and then literally half a second later came the loudest roar of thunder I've ever heard in my life. It actually, I felt it in my core. Like it's almost like my heart stopped. Like it shook me as I'm lying in bed. And as soon as I heard that thunder, I woke right up. I was just like, I'm kind of all, a little hazy. And then as soon as I hear that thunder, I'm wide awake. It just shook me. And in that moment, I realized that the command of thunder requires no effort from God. That he can send something like that is powerful enough to, if it hits me, will kill me, but is powerful enough that shocks me to my core and makes me realize how small I am. And in that moment, I was afraid of God. I had the fear of the Lord in me, because in that moment I said, if he wants to, he can end my life at any second. Not afraid like, oh, he's so scary. That's not, but it's this understanding he is powerful. He is big and he is strong. And I dare not just treat it lightly. That's what I think is a biblical understanding of what the fear of the Lord is. You appreciate his power and you dare not tread lightly around him. Now, God says in our passage that if you fear him, you will have no lack. Those who fear him will have no lack. Here's what that means. It means that if we know who God is, to the best of our knowledge, we understand his bigness, his power, in light of our smallness, the fact that he's powerful enough to end our lives in an instant, that he's holy, that he's righteous. If we understand that, if we live in that, he will give us what we need to obey and follow him. That's what that means. Those who fear him have no lack. When you appreciate who God is and who you are in light of who he is, and you walk in that, then as long as you are in that place, he will give you whatever you need to do what he's called you to do. He will provide the means for you to obey and follow him. Sometimes he might give you more, but he'll never give you less. Never give you less than what you need. But God will give you what you need. What does that mean? Even, is that the same thing for everyone? Is it different for people? Some people would think, here are our needs. We need shelter. We need some sort of adequate shelter. And we need a certain amount of food. Like, people come up with different ideas of need. I need a car. So you ask people what they need, you get a different answer from every person. So what do you need? What does that mean? This isn't a cop-out, but this is the truth. The only one who knows what each person needs is God. I don't even know what I need. I don't know what I need. There are things I think of, like, obviously I need oxygen, right? But someone who has bigger lungs needs more oxygen than this guy, right? So I don't know the full extent of my needs, what I actually need to live and function. I don't know, and no one knows. Only God knows. So here's what I trust. I trust that he knows, and so long as I walk in obedience, he'll give me whatever I need to continue to be obedient. Because Stephen, who was stoned to death, obviously had different needs than someone else, right? Stephen didn't need, for example, protection. He didn't need to be protected from, he didn't need that because obviously God didn't give him that. Not everyone needs to own a house. Not everyone needs a car. right? So only God knows what we need. And here's what he promises. If you appreciate my bigness and my power, you walk in that, I will give you what I know and have determined you need to do what I've called you to do. And I'll make sure that you'll be able to do it. That's the promise of God. So I can be sure he'll give me what I need, whatever that is. Because I don't know. Because apparently, what I don't need is a lot of money. Right? I don't need that. Because if I did, he'd give it to me. If that's what I needed, he would give it to me to do. Now, there are some people who live in parts of the world where in order to live in this city, you need to be able to afford an expensive house. And so if you're going to minister to people in that community, you need to live in that city. So someone who lives, for example, on the North Shore in Vancouver needs more money than I do because they need to be able to afford a house to live in that community to minister to the people there. But I don't need that. So he gives us whatever we need to do what he's called us to do. And that's different from person to person. And so he's gracious because he says he'll give me what I need. And so I fear him and approach him with the right heart and trust that he will give me what I need. And this, what we've uncovered in this passage, this is a picture of what our lives should look like. And this is what our lives should look like. We fear God appropriately in all of life. Right? We don't just say, I'll fear him on Sunday. I'll fear him when I'm thinking, what movie am I going to watch? How am I going to spend my time? How am I going to spend my money? How am I going to treat my wife? How am I going to treat my kids? How am I going to treat my friends? In all aspects of life, I fear him appropriately. And I know that at any moment, it is his prerogative to take my life. He can if he wants to. So I fear him appropriately. And as I do that, I encounter him. I engage with him in all aspects of my life. What does that mean? Well, it means that I accept the invitation from him to taste and see that he's good, to know that in all aspects of my life, at all times, the thing that satisfies me the most, that pleases me the most, and that is really what I desire most is him. And so I walk in that and I move in that direction. That's how I engage with God, when I understand that truth. And when I look at him, now obviously I can't look at him like he's here, but again, think of direction. I'm moving towards him. I'm thinking about who he is and what he's done. My eyes are fixed on him. You'll see that in the scriptures. So we engage with the living God at all times and in all circumstances as we taste that he's good, as we know that he satisfies, as we look at him and move towards him. And then if we do that, right, if we are obedient in looking towards him, moving towards him, tasting that he is good, knowing he fulfills our desires, knowing that he's what we've been made to want, and we appropriately fear him, we don't just tread lightly with that. We don't think of that as a small thing. As we move in that, then he says, I'll give you what you need to follow and obey me. You won't lack. You won't lack what you need to do what I've called you to do. This is what I believe is our mission as a church. I think this is what God has said. This is why you're here. You're here for yourselves to accept the invitation that he's offering us. But we're also here to say to others, you need to taste and see that he's good. You need to fear him. But if you walk in that, he'll give you whatever you need to do what he's called you to do. We're here to say to others, taste him. He's good. He satisfies. Look at him. There's grace and there's mercy and there's beauty. Fear him because he's big and you're not. And God will give you what you need to follow and obey him. That's our mission. As a church, I believe that's why God has called this thing about. He's inviting us. And we're called to invite others, again, to experience the living God at all times and in all circumstances.